Today I'm installing these MaxpeedingRods Coilovers onto my 2007 Honda Fit Sport with plenty of that Ohio rust. I'll show how to modify the coilovers to get them to fit properly. Then we'll visit the wall of wheels to pick out some new shoes for the old girl, and then modify the coilovers some more to fix the positive camber and toe out up front. The front is a lot more work, so let's get that out of the way first, then knock out the rears in no time. The first thing to do is grab a T40 Torx Allen wrench. And I'm going to make sure I can get this bolt loose first before I even start on anything else. On to the brakes. Brake line needs to come off from this bracket, 12 millimeter, and this bolt is completely rusted in place. Let it soak in some PB for a bit. The two caliper bolts on the back are 17 millimeters. Need a short extension as well. Get the bucket ready so the weight of the caliper isn't just hanging on the rubber brake line. This one is really fighting me. I have a tiny chisel. The nut is 32 millimeters. Stabilizer nut is 17 mil. Next comes the tie rod end nut. And the castle nut is 17 millimeters. Next, I need to unhook the ABS sensor from this rusty bracket. And the bracket is held on with this top bolt. The nut and bolt are both 19 millimeters. And now I can separate the knuckle from the strut. Here's where the ABS sensor goes into the knuckle. They're supposed to come right out after removing the 10 millimeter bolt, but I already bought new ones because they're always rusted in place. And they always end up breaking. Yep, it's stuck. Maybe I'll have enough room to slide the axle out of the knuckle without having to remove the ABS sensor. Unhooked that plastic clip on the wire to get some more slack. Almost. There. Get this sway bar end link out of the way now. Now it's time to remove the old strut and spring. Got the T40 Torx again, and a 17 millimeter ratcheting wrench to speed things up. And save the top rubber piece and the washer and the nut. I'll reuse this as well. And I also need to reuse this bearing. So I rid of this spring compressor. This is what allows the top of the strut to rotate for turning. If you don't want to mess around with the spring compressor, KYB sells a strut mount kit with all the parts you need to transfer over to the new coilover. I'll put the part number for the kit in the description. Now to assemble the coilover. Bearing fits right in here like this, and then on goes the nut. Then this rubber piece, and it sandwiches the strut tower of the car. Then on top of the strut tower goes this rubber piece, and that's not enough thread showing. I'm loosening the bottom spring perch because I'll have too much preload if I just thread the nut on farther with the perch where it was. Okay, so first the lower bushing, then I'll get this in place under the shock tower, then the top bushing, washer, and nut. I'm giving the detail here because the directions say nothing about this. If you don't have an extra helper, this is the way to do it. Hold the coilover with one hand, get the top through the strut tower opening, then the top rubber bushing, the washer, and the nut. Just getting it threaded on by hand for right now. Now I'll take off the lower mount. Loosen this bracket with a 6mm hex and a 17mm wrench. And this is where the top of the sway bar end link will mount. Throw some anti-seize on the inside of this lower mount, since this will get driven through winter. I'll start right here, which might be close to the stock height, and then adjust from there to go lower. For the sway bar end link, I want the distance between the bracket and where the knuckle mounts to be the same as the factory setup. I need to spin it 180 so it faces the front. Just getting the axle nut finger tight for now. Here is the brake line bracket from the factory strut. It went over here. I need to grind down this little post because there's no little hole in the lower mount of the coilovers for that little post to fit into. Ah, crap. The bolt is too big for the hole, but I need this thickness because the bolt needs to fit snug through the knuckle. Otherwise, the knuckle will have play. So I need to enlarge these holes. I was kind of surprised I had to drill these holes out to install these. After researching online, it seems to be this way for all the MaxpeedingRods coilovers for the Honda Fit. Now that I'm able to fit the bolts through, I can put on this little bracket. It goes over the end of the top bolt, and then the nut on top of the bracket. And the ABS sensor. There's nowhere for these to clip in on the new suspension, so this part will get zip tied. And the tie rod end link goes in from the top. The axle nut, and stake it so it stays put. Now, all you Southwest subscribers are probably cringing at me reusing this caliper, but it actually works fine. This is just how used calipers look in Ohio. Unless you paint them when they're brand new, like I did on the TSX, those look good after winter. I'll put a link to that video in the description. I almost forgot the castle nut for the lower ball joint. And the cotter pin should go right in. I may not have the space in the castle nut perfectly lined up with the hole. And a zip tie is about the best solution I have for this ABS line. Now for the sway bar end link. I need to turn this straight. Okay, now come down a little. Now with the car back on the ground and some weight on the suspension, the top of the strut is all the way through and I can thread this nut on a lot easier. To stop the rod from spinning, I have a 6mm hex and that will allow me to tighten the nut. Now let's move on to the much less complicated rear suspension of this 2007 Honda Fit. With the jack under the spring of the side I'm working on and the rear supported on jack stands, both sides, the first thing to do is remove the rear shock. I'm making sure there's just a little bit of tension, a little bit of upward pressure from the jack under this rear spring mount. And that will take the pressure off of the mounting hardware of the shock and make it easier for the lower bolt to come out. Still too much pressure to pull it out by hand. Now, let the jack down. Kick it. Dun, dun, dun. I need to pry the old spring out. It's actually a lot easier if you have an extra person to stand on the brake drum to push the suspension down. I'm here doing the one-man show version. Almost got it. This thing does not want to come out. Now, go inside the trunk or the hatch. Here's the top of the shock. This bolt needs to come out. I have a 5mm hex to stop the rod from spinning, and this nut is 14mm. Speed this up with a ratcheting wrench. Save these guys. And the shock pulls right out. Note the metal sleeve on here. I need to reuse this. It won't just slide off because it's crimped right here and the threads are in the way. So I need to grind down these threads. So close. Now on the new shock, take off the nut and the washer, and the sleeve doesn't go on over the threads because of that crimped area on the inside. So I need to file that down. Still have a ways to go. I'll put a link to one of these files in the description in case you don't have one. And this should be good. Now I can install the shock and bring these. Oh yeah, probably need these too. Here's the old spring and the new. And the threaded body and the perch sit under it like this. Pull off this rubber isolator from the old spring, and that's going to sit under the new base, so it's not metal on metal. However, it doesn't exactly fit great, so I need to cut it right about in the middle here, and then it should be about flush. And now it sits perfect. This little nub here stops it from spinning. I'll start with it set high and go lower from there. Make sure the bottom is threaded on all the way as well. Pull this rubber isolator from the top of the old spring and it fits the new spring without any cutting. The spring isn't all the way on the perch down there. That's mo better. Now I found out when I did the other side, the lower mount hits right here. It's contacting the axle beam, so the shock can't point straight up. So let's figure out where I need to grind here. Throw this bolt in for a sec. Right where that mark is where I need to grind. That might be good. Now the shock needs to go up through there. So I'll hold the shock here with one hand and get the washer and nut started with the other hand. And inside the car, the beveled edge faces up, and then the new washer, and then the new nut on top. And the shock is in, just hanging there. Now I need to line up the lower holes. One more check to make sure everything clears and nothing's rubbing or binding. Since I ground this paint off here, I'll throw some anti-seize or any kind of grease will do on there just to make sure it doesn't rust. I'll get the axle too. And the OEM bolt was kind of rusty, so let's get that. There's some back and forth play there. I could add some washers or just torque it down more. And once again, I'm in Ohio. And the new nut is 17 millimeters, and the rod still uses a 5 millimeter hex on top to hold it in place. And the rear is done. Let's get it outside and see how it looks. Maybe even a tiny bit higher than it was from the factory. So yeah, you could put the car back to the factory ride height with these coilovers if you wanted to. But that's not why anyone installs coilovers, so I started by adjusting the front, lowering it about 1.5 inches down from the height I had initially set them at. And then I went to lower the rear about 1.25 inches because I often carry kids or tools in the rear, and I wanted to leave some room for it to sit level with the extra weight. But the perch was very tight and difficult to turn with the full tension from the spring against it. So it was actually faster to unbolt the shock and drop the rear to take the tension off the spring and then adjust the perch. Then I tightened the locking collar and rolled it outside for another look. Maybe a tad higher in the rear still, but the springs do need some time to settle in, so I'll wait a few days before taking it in for an alignment. This is what I want though, not slammed. It's a daily driver / winter car, so I don't want it too low. I like my cars lowered how I think they should have been from the factory. Same goes for the Mustang and the TSX. My EG was pretty low, and I got tired of cringing over every bump in the road. So it's the next day, and I'm gonna throw some wheels on the Fit. I just noticed the front camber looks a little weird. I didn't think I went low enough to need any kind of camber kit. Or maybe that's just toe out. I can't really tell right now. I guess I'll just wait and see how the alignment goes. But first, and here we are at the wall of wheels. So most of these are 5 lug. These are 4x100, but those are for Toyota, for a Scion. So the center bore is 2 millimeters too small for a Honda. Those are 4x100. Look for something with tires. 5 lug. You know what though? I think we got some 4x100s right there. And yes, 4x100 OZ Racing Starlights. I got the center caps somewhere, but we don't need those. I'll find some tuner lugs and they'll look good. It's like this one still has a little bit of white plastic dip on it from back in the day. They're 15x7 and the offset is 27. Oh, these are gonna poke. We'll see how they look. Okay, so 27 offset on a 15x7 is a little on the aggressive side with a 205/50 tire. Looks okay, but it needs to go lower to look better. And then I'm guessing I'll rub unless I do some fender work. I don't know. What do you guys think? It really does change the look of the car. Maybe the TE37s are the way to go. With these wider wheels, I can really see that I've got something going on with the front camber. Not sure if you can see it through the camera, but it's definitely positive. Remember when I drilled these holes out and the top hole was slotted? Well, this bolt is hanging out a little past the edge of the bracket. And if I can bring this top bolt inward on the slotted hole, that's going to lean the top of the knuckle in, and that will decrease the positive camber. When I initially drilled the holes to enlarge them, I drilled in the center of the slotted hole on the top. So the bolt wasn't able to slide all the way inward, and that's why the camber was on the positive side. By enlarging the entire slot to allow the bolt to sit farther inward, that added some much needed negative camber to the knuckle. So now look at the range of adjustment that I have on the upper bolt. Now when I put the weight on the outside of the hub where the wheel would mount, you saw that bolt shift back in the slot and the whole knuckle and mounting flange for the wheel shifted. And that looks much better. Adjusting those top bolt holes fixed the bad toe out as well. I can't even hear the tires scrubbing from the toe out anymore. There's a little negative camber on the rear, but that's not adjustable and I don't mind it. The car actually drives as good as, if not a little better, than it did before I replaced everything. And I haven't even had it aligned yet. So I'll let the new suspension settle and schedule an appointment after that. There is one weird noise. When turning to full lock, I hear the springs creaking on both sides. I guess that's just a spring rotating with the suspension. I'm not sure if that's expected with coilovers on McPherson front suspension or not. What do you guys think? I sprayed the top and bottom of the passenger side spring with WD-40, and it seems to do it even more now. But overall, the car handles much better. These fits are actually a lot of fun, and they're cheap. I'll put a link to the MaxpeedingRods Coilovers in the description, as well as a list of all the tools I use to install them. Thanks for watching.